Hello and welcome to another scintillating episode of Almost Breaking News. My name is Robert Llewellyn and I am the founder and one of the hosts of the Fully Charged Show and the Everything Electric Show.
Love everything electric? Join us live in the South this October and in Australia, London and Canada in 2025.
Now, we have talked about Norway for over a decade. We've been there many times. We've used the country as an example of how electric car sales can grow and how there can be the infrastructure to support them. We've discussed the percentage of new car sales that are electric. It's currently 94.3%. I'm just going to repeat that. 94.3% of all car sales in Norway are 100% electric. That's I'd call that the majority. We've discussed the fact that the Norwegian government is able to do this because of the vast income they receive from exporting oil and gas. So in some ways, we in the UK are helping pay for all these electric vehicles because we still burn their gas. Hopefully one day we'll stop Norway. But what has just happened in Norway is worth a mention. There are now more electric cars on the road in Norway than petrol/gasoline cars. That is amazing. That is 100% positive. That represents a massive drop in liquid fuel being burned in Norway. There's only one small negative footnote that I really should mention. There are still close to 1 million diesel cars on the roads in Norway. Okay, virtually no one is buying a new diesel car now, but they still make up the bulk of private vehicles in the country. It's a transition. Norway is ahead of any other country on the planet, so that makes it a great place to see how they deal with over a third of their private cars being 100% electric. We're not talking about hybrids. Soon it will be half, and in 10 years there will be so few combustion cars they won't register on the graph. Nice. Next story. Now, here's what's happening. Over the course of the last year or so, sales of battery electric vehicles, while continuing to grow, have posted a lower year-over-year percentage growth rate than they have in previous years. So they're still growing. The total number of sales is still growing very fast, but not quite as fast as they were growing last year. They're still growing. That's important. Still growing incredibly fast, but not quite as incredibly, unbelievably fast as last year. I can't think of another way of describing the fact that sales of electric cars around the world are increasing. That's a simple statement of fact. Sales of diesel cars have dropped so significantly right across Europe, it's an absolute disaster for manufacturers. And interestingly, in London, I've just found this out, the sale of diesel fuel from all the fuel stations in and around London has dropped by 40%. So it just, boom, really big drop. Basically, the message has finally started to have an impact. Diesel vans, cars, trucks, buses are very, very harmful to human beings, for pity's sake. I mean, we've only known about this for 40 years. So, change is hard. You can't rush it overnight. But still, the headlines you see endlessly in the pathetic British press are that electric car sales have plummeted, not fractionally reduced, or they are down a teeny weeny bit. No, they have plummeted. Who might these headlines and the subtext and message behind them benefit? The general public? No. The climate? Definitely not. The automobile industry? Interestingly, no. Who else might be interested in spreading as much negative news about electric vehicles as it's possible to bribe people and dodgy journalists to print? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I hate people who stroke their chins when they're thinking. I never do. This is how I think. Anyway, next story. Now, when discussing the topic of incredibly dodgy schemes used by big corporations to try and dupe, lie and con the general public, the Upstream Emission Reduction, or UER, credit scheme in Germany is certainly right up there with the very worst. It's been revealed that this system of offsetting the massive carbon output by oil and gas companies is beyond dodgy. Apparently dozens of overseas projects were faked putting German regulators, auditors and companies like Shell in the rather uncomfortable #AUKS spotlight. These systems are complex and tedious beyond belief, but bear with me just for a moment. UERs are a tool German fuel suppliers use to meet emissions targets through carbon offsetting further upstream in the supply chain. That's the official explanation. So you don't stop burning stuff here, you try and do less burny stuff over there, and then you say, that is because of us, so can we pretend we've burnt slightly less? The regulatory rules are that projects need to be newly built, all these projects around there are newly built, and prove to have additional CO2 reduction benefits. So they have long lists of projects around the world, one of them being a wind turbine in China. Well, that's a very good thing. That's a very sensible thing to do. Invest in a wind turbine in China and use those carbon credits to offset the damage you're doing in Germany and Europe. All the clean electricity the turbine produces helps offset. It helps offset the toxic emissions they pump out to give their shareholders massive, bloated, sweating payouts. But when someone went to look at the location of this turbine, literally on Google Maps, the only thing there was a chicken farm. I'm not making this up. It's a massive global con. Two-bit shysters are raking in a fortune fiddling around with carbon credits and carbon offsets and all the other dodgy two-bit con games the fossil fuel industry is playing to keep us burning their products. Aren't they a lovely bunch of people? Next story. Now, as we all know, the main producers of electric vehicles are in Asia, with China a million miles in the lead. But this story caught my eye. The first electric car to be built in Nigeria. The Irizar company in Nigeria have just released their first designed and built electric car for the local market. Now, there's very little information available about this vehicle that I can find, other than they have already sold out the first production run. Now, while it's true that the Hyundai Kona was being built in Nigeria, this is the first truly indigenous African car. And wouldn't it be great if Africa can shed the burden of combustion vehicles altogether and hop straight to electric cars, powered by solar? I think they've got quite a lot of sunshine. And in a similar way to the way they bypassed landline telephones and went straight to cell phones or mobiles, a technology that has transformed their economies. From now on, I will be scouring the news for more information about African-built electric vehicles. And if you know anything about other countries in Africa that are making electric ground transport, and I know it's happening, I've spoken to many people from that area, please let me know and tell us in the comments. Next story. Many of you will know the long, slow increase in renewable generation in the UK and Europe. It's happening, but it's slow and steady. Now, we can produce around 61 gigawatts in the UK at any one time. That is made up of gas, of nuclear and renewables. Oh yeah, and burning massive amounts of wood from North America at the Drax power station, which is the most polluting power plant in the country, and which also receives millions in bill payer subsidies because burning wood is renewable. More on that story another time because it really gets my goat. Anyway, the number to remember is 61 gigawatts. That is what we demand on the absolute peak, very cold winter day when everyone turns everything on because they're so depressed because it's another winter coming. I've just checked today. It's a sunny, mild day today, and our demand is way less than half of that. It's about 28 gigawatts, so much, much less. So you can imagine this time of the year it's very low. In the midwinter, it's really high. Meanwhile, in this year, 2024, there has already been more renewable energy generation capacity installed and linked to the grid in China than the entire UK can generate at peak time. So not just what we generate with renewables, all our generation. I.e., the Chinese have installed more than 60 gigawatts of renewables in 9 months this year. In 9 months. I mean, it's taken us 20 years to get up to about, 20 gigawatts or something of renewables. And they've done 60 gigawatts in 9 months. I'll just leave that there to ferment. Next story. Now, I thought that even if I haven't seen it in the real world, I would know about this company. But, I've never heard of them before. Irizar, I don't know how you say it, Irizar. They make all manner of electronic and engineering equipment, but have been making buses for over 100 years in Spain. For the last 8 years, they've been making 100% electric buses, loads of them. They are based in Spain, but have production facilities in Morocco, Brazil, and Mexico. They have just delivered their 1,000th electric bus. There's loads of them in Spanish and French cities. They are super advanced, lighter and more reliable than many of their competitors, and they also supply charging, drive and energy storage infrastructures. All this stuff is being made entirely in Spain, not in China. I just thought I'd mention it. Next story. Now, as many people will tell you, loads of people very happily tell you, electric propulsion is fine for very short distances in very small vehicles in cities. And that's all they're good for. And they are wrong, but that doesn't stop some people going on and on about that, the limited role that electric vehicles have. So here's another example of a vehicle that electric transport skeptics would be sure would never be electric. Fire engines, or in North America, fire trucks. Berlin now has the world's largest fleet of 100% battery electric fire engines made by the Austrian fire equipment supplier Rosenbauer. The Rosenbauer RT, which stands for Revolutionary Technology, are based on a 4x4 chassis with 2 electric motors, each with a continuous output of 130 kilowatts. That's quite beefy. They come with 2 batteries with a total capacity of 132 kilowatt hours on board. Now, apart from Berlin, these machines are in service in Paris, Basel in Switzerland, and Vienna in Austria. Now, they were originally tested on the streets of Berlin during a 13-month test phase. 1,400 operations were handled, over 770 hours of use were logged, and more than 13,000 kilometres were covered by these trucks. The Rosenbauer RT was deployed up to 16 times a day for 13 months. So basically, electric fire engines, or trucks if you prefer, they actually work, they're actually useful. That's enough. Next story. Batteries. Whatever opinion you or I or anyone has about batteries right now will be out of date right now. Yes, that's how quick this sector is developing. At the SNE Battery Day 2024 Expo in Seoul, South Korea recently, Samsung revealed that its pilot solid-state battery production line is fully operational. They're already churning them out. So why all the hoo-ha about solid-state batteries? Basically, they are smaller, lighter, and way more energy dense than any batteries currently in use today. In a statement, Samsung explained the following. All solid-state batteries can enhance safety by replacing liquid components with solid ones. When used in the same pack size as existing products, they reduce weight and take up less space. Now, Samsung's claim an energy density of 500 watt-hours a kilogram. Now, that might not mean anything to some of you, but that is nearly double the absolute best, which is around 270, 280 watt-hours a kilogram density in things like in a modern Tesla and many mainstream EV batteries. I mean, 500 watt-hours a kilogram is a real big step change. Due to their higher production costs, these batteries' initial application will be limited to the super premium EV segment. That's a shame. However, they are suggesting a driving range of over 600 miles, and wait for it, charging times under 10 minutes. Those are all good, but this is the real kicker. A 20-year, million-mile lifespan. I'm going to repeat that because I like repeating big numbers like that. These batteries have a 20-year, million-mile lifespan. How many combustion engines have them? Don't even ask. Meanwhile, MG have announced that the MG4, the car I'm currently driving, will have solid-state batteries in 2025. I think that's probably next year. This breakthrough technology will offer a substantial upgrade over existing lithium-ion batteries that are in the cars, boasting double the energy density. As a result, MG's upcoming EVs are expected to have longer ranges, lighter weight, and reduced production costs. So that's interesting. They say it's going to be cheaper. So whatever the cost turns out to be, and we know from experience that battery costs go down fairly rapidly as manufacturing capacity increases, but clearly we are rapidly heading for a smaller, lighter, safer, longer lasting and more energy dense battery. Meanwhile, the latest combustion engines remain virtually identical to a combustion engine from 40 years ago. Well, there we go. Next story. An interesting result of the recently announced tariffs on Chinese-built electric cars in the USA and Canada and Europe. It seems to be resulting in a bit of a boom time for electric vehicle uptake in Australia. The main competitor set to suffer from this massive new influx is, of course, Tesla. Only a few years back, and I'm talking from experience, particularly in Australia, there was Tesla, that was it, everywhere, and a few artisan EV conversions of older gasoline cars. Really brilliant stuff, but basically it was Tesla. They had a monopoly down under. That has really changed. All the big Chinese brands have a strong position in Australia, and that is set to grow. We are particularly aware of this at our Everything Electric event in Sydney each year. Every year we have the most Chinese-built electric cars on display than anywhere else we run shows around the globe. This is literally the start of the change. Many other Chinese brands are set to launch in the Australian market as the increase in electric vehicles uptake just keeps accelerating. And you may have heard on a recent Fully Charged Show podcast I recorded with Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, who has a fascinating take on the challenge of Chinese automotive industry. If you haven't heard it, it is really worth having a listen. He knows how the automotive industry works, let's just put it there. There have been plenty of stories about how companies like Ford are pulling back on their electric ambitions. But interestingly, Ford are currently converting one of their biggest plants in Mexico to start manufacturing electric drive systems, including batteries. They will be launching numerous electric models in the coming years. And I think it's important to remind ourselves that the sales of the F-150 Lightning pickup truck and the Mustang Mach-E are a very close second to the Tesla Model 3 in the USA. They are selling trainloads of electric cars. Anyway, that's enough. Finally, I recently drove across France in the, I have to say, rather gorgeous BMW i5 eDrive 40 M Sport Pro Touring. So here's a little homemade road trip video I shot during our journey.
Bonjour et bienvenue, je m'appelle Robert Llewellyn et je suis le fondateur et un des présentateurs de l'émission Fully Charged. Ici, c'est la France. Ça, c'est le BMW G61 i5 eDrive 40 M Sport Pro Touring. Oh. So the plan was to drive to a friend's birthday party in the Vosges Mountains in the east of France, very near the German border, not far from Switzerland. Lovely. And we'd fly or get the train, and then we got this offer from BMW. Do you want to use this car? And it was a treat. That was unexpected, and so I said yes, please, rather rapidly. And the car arrived yesterday. So far, I've driven it from our house in the west of England to Dover to the tunnel. Went through the tunnel. This car has genuine, realistic 300+ mile range. On an auto route like this, I'm traveling at 115 kilometers an hour, so under the speed limit, but it's very relaxing. There's not that much traffic on the road. The road is incredibly smooth. There's no potholes so far. And also, this car is magnificent. If you have the budget for a car like this, then you're very, very, very privileged and very lucky. I just couldn't help reflecting when I was driving it yesterday that when I first drove an electric car 15, 16 years ago, I thought it was an amazing piece of engineering that it worked, and you could drive probably on these roads at this speed 50 miles. or maybe say 80 kilometers. In this car, you can drive at the moment about 500 kilometers or about 300 miles. So that's happened in that period of time, but also the kind of level of sophistication and the level of luxury in this car, because I've often banged on about we want smaller, cheaper, lighter cars, which I think we definitely do, and there's no question of it, and we can tell from people watching our shows what they're really interested in. But this isn't an SUV, it's a car. It's an estate car, which loads of people want, an estate car, and they don't want an SUV. There are variants of this car. This is the absolute top of the range. It is about £100,000, so about 130,000 euros, somewhere around there, and the same in dollars. It's expensive. It's got an 82 kilowatt hour usable battery pack. It's fast if you want it to be. I've got it set to efficient at the moment for maximum range, but I can't tell you how low the anxiety about ranges on this journey. It's right down low. Where's the toilets? Can I get a coffee? Can we stop here? We might stop on this leg of the journey because we've got another 254 kilometers to go. We might stop on this journey for us. We certainly won't stop for the car. The car's got still over 500 kilometers of range. So that, I just want to underline that used to be a problem. In a Mitsubishi i-MiEV in 2009, range anxiety was genuine. In this thing, it's like, what's your problem? Let me just make sure.
That's the time where we are speaking.
I have not done this before, so this is new to me too.
Okay. Hop.
Tu l'as trouvé où ton...
Ah ouais. Oh. C'est comme Disneyland.
I think that will do. I think
Oh bordel. Ah oui, effectivement, ça fait des guillis, ça fait des guillis dans l'estomac. Hein.
I've done some calculations because I had to wait a bit to get the figures through the bank and through our cards and everything that we used. So charged 4 times, as I've said before, and the total of that was £85.41. That's what it cost to drive 989 miles, basically. That is 3 Tesla superchargers and 1 Ionity charger. And I've worked out now, I had to Google it, to how much a BMW i5 with the turbocharged V8 hybrid uses. And this is so according to BMW's figures, not some randomer, definitely the official figures, it would cost £247.25 in petrol. And now that is based on UK petrol prices, but from what I could judge in France, the petrol prices there are similar. If they're slightly more, it's not much more. If they're slightly less, it's not much less. So somewhere around the £247. So obviously a considerable saving with this car, even though it's incredibly big, expensive and luxurious. Other than the fact that it's got a ridiculously long name, it is a ridiculously long car, it is ridiculously expensive. All those things aside, the people who can afford to buy this car are going to have such an extraordinary electric vehicle experience that was utterly unimaginable 14 years ago when this channel started. That is the truth of this incredible machine. One last thing, the key, bloody enormous, really heavy, it pulls my trousers down. Good God. Well, that's all. We'll be back next month with more almost breaking news. I hope you enjoyed that. Please do subscribe. Please tell your friends about it. And of course, as always, if you have been, thank you for watching.